I call it music for heavy listening because I want this to be listened to in a different way from most recitals. I want you to be more aware of the ingenuity and activity and choices that composers make. And hopefully these graphs will sort of help you sort of follow the things as they happen. So I began doing this some years ago, 2 years ago actually. So I've been going through the Bach Well-Tempered Clavier second book and the Freund Piano Preludes, which started in 1990, and I've written one every year. So far I've gotten through the first 4 of those, and then the new one for each year, and so you get to hear a premiere at the end of this. So the Bach that I'm focusing on tonight are the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th of the second book. So that will take us E major, E minor, F major, and F minor. And we are starting with the E major prelude. So this tremendously beguiling little duo is an interesting form because you can see this material in the green box is this little duo between soprano and alto with the bass finally motivated to join in later on. And then it repeats. Now that seems like significant material, but it only happens here and here, and that gives me a chance to point out that there is this repeat mark here. So this is in a binary form, so that everything you hear twice. Every section is repeated. So when I get to here, I go back and play that page again. Then I'll start here with music that's like the beginning. Very quickly veers off into minor keys, and that's why this purple stuff always means it's a minor key. And these little boxes show where cadences are. So that's pretty much what happens to the first part of the piece. The second part of the piece is what leads us to this cadence in the dominant key. And that has 2 pieces of material. There's red and there's yellow. And the red has this bouncy bass line. Series of suspensions. And then the soprano takes over the bouncy thing, but the soprano does it in 2/4. And leads to a cadence. Well, the logical thing for a composer to do would be to take that material and transpose it to E major and end the piece. What Bach does is very crazy because he puts the yellow material first. So the little bouncy soprano line comes first, and then the red stuff which leaves us kind of unsettled. It's not the kind of strong cadence ending that we had in the first part. So Bach has to add this coda, this little fanfare, which is reminiscent of what the bass did at the beginning of the piece. And the fugue follows that. And what I'm going to do is talk about the prelude and fugue in each key, and then perform it. So it's a little lecture, performance, lecture, performance. And so you'll hear right after, on the heels of that bouncy little prelude, is this very stately, regal fugue. It's a 6-note subject, very slow. And what we mean by a fugue is that every voice is a 4-voice fugue. It's very much like a SATB choir, that each voice comes in with that same subject. And it's very traditional in that each entrance is either on E or the tenor comes in, and then the alto Now this is the only time at the exposition, the first time you hear those subjects, that their voices are separated. Otherwise, they're on top of each other. We call that a stretto. So the alto comes in, and then the tenor comes in, and then the bass comes in, and then the soprano comes in. And you can see that kind of thing happening throughout the piece. One interesting thing that happens on the second half of the piece is that the subject is in diminution, twice as fast. And finally, that becomes not only twice as fast, but also upside down. So we get this wonderful moment where all the voices are moving in a scale. But at that moment, the cadence, this little dotted box, is where the alto comes in. It's been gone for a long time, the subject, and here it comes in the subject. So after this cadence. And that leads us often to this strange cadence in the key of G sharp minor. All these cadences are in minor keys, which is kind of interesting. Now there's one other part of the important piece of material, is the counter subject. And normally a counter subject follows the subject wherever it goes, and we'll see that in the E minor fugue. Here the counter subject, this red material, is used just in the exposition to accompany the subject. So when the tenor comes in, the bass has this. It's a little bit of a workout in a section all to itself, and then it disappears totally until the very end of the piece. So the end of the piece, that comes in this marvelous sequence where the soprano comes in, and it feels like the trumpet's entering at the end of the B minor mass. The only time we hear anything close to that high in the soprano. And at the same time, the tenor is doing this return of the red, but an elongated form of it. So, and this is the last time we hear the subject, and it's in the bass, and it's in the wrong key. So we have to add a little coda to make the piece finally end in E major. So now we go to the parallel minor key, E minor, and very, very different, not only because it's minor and major, but also because the whole attitude about structure is different. You remember the E major prelude had just little capricious ideas that came from out of nowhere. Here, this is every little bit of material is based on the opening move, which is turned upside down to make the sort of the theme of the piece. So just repeating it and putting it at different pitch levels, that sequential treatment is what informs the first half of the piece. But before the piece gets very far, we start splitting that up so that the little initial idea so you can see in this yellow passage that ba-da-ba-da-ba-da is split back and forth in an imitation between the two voices. And then now it's turned into a long line with a bigger scale descent. But what sticks out to your ear, and I hope you can notice this means we're getting close to the end of this section when you hear this trill. Upside down and right side up together is this little mirror thing that leads us to this cadence. And you'll see that this is also a binary form, which means there's a repeat mark here. So we get to this B cadence, and we can take the first ending and go back to the beginning, and then that takes us to a final B cadence that starts the second half of the piece. The second half of the piece is built on a complete upside down version of the first two measures of the piece. But that takes up and keeps repeating that. And that becomes the tune. This orangish material for the second half of the piece has a lot of that in it. There's two performances of that and then two more performances of that. So that creates this section. And then we have a return of everything we heard the first time around. But Bach never does anything in a simple way, so you'll notice that here the trills are shorter. There is this that big moment in the bass that wasn't around the first time. So Bach is always giving you something more, including the cadence, which is a deceptive cadence. So the E major fugue you just heard, had a 6-note subject moving very slowly. Here we have a subject which goes on for something like 30 notes, and it has 3 sort of recognizable parts in it. One is the 16th notes driving upward. Then this syncopated dotted notes. Subject, and every time you see the green, you'll see that's the whole thing is there, including the triplet eighth notes at the end. Sometimes these triplet eighth notes keep going on and on and on to create an episode which leads us to a new key. We hear the subject in friendly major keys of G major and D major through this page. And finally, the subject comes back, and usually Bach saves these big moments for the last third of the piece. And this is the A minor statement. So we've had lots of E minors and B minors and majors, but now A minor is sort of the granddaddy key of E minor. So and there aren't very many many sopranos I'd like to hear sing that. But that's really, featuring the top of the range. And then the real final statement is in the bass. So that's basically the story of the piece. There is some nice counter melody. For example, this fugue does have a counter subject, something that's always there. When the green is there, the red always starts off with it, and it's this fanfare. And then a little brown thing, which makes a great foil. The brown thing is just a scale in half notes, and you'll always hear it. Every time you hear the subject, you'll hear first the fanfare, and then you'll hear the downward half note scale. And you can see that every time you see the green, you see the red and the half note scale. But the red, the fanfare, is not always. It keeps changing, it becomes more interesting, but always recognizable for what it is. And the greatest one is when the bass has the counter subject now becomes. So, a great composer is always looking for new ways to make the material come to a stronger kind of life and to implement the formal structure of the piece. One thing you might notice here is all this purple stuff at the end, and that's just sort of a big cadenza that Bach uses to end this spectacular E minor fugue. a half step to F major. Sorry about that. And this prelude is again exceptional in many ways. One is that it's the only one I'm playing tonight that doesn't have repeat marks in it. So it's a straight, flowing all the way kind of piece. I think of it as a big river that's just flowing along. And one of the things that contributes to that water analogy is this bit here. And let me see if I can blow it up a little bit. So here you see that what would be a flowing eighth note idea is colored by holding on to the notes, which is something that works really well on the piano. I think this is sort of like a harpsichord that I'm playing because it has some of the nice things about harpsichord, but also allows me to do these sustained notes, which seems to be what this entire prelude is of importance to Bach. So we'll see that throughout the piece. There's a big cadence here in C major, and let me play. I'm going to begin here and play this C major cadence, and listen for what happens when the blue stuff is coloring the final C major chord. Sort of spray from the waterfall of the C major. And you'll hear a lot of that kind of effect throughout the piece. So we'll see that cadence at the end of the piece too. This is, although it's sort of a free form without the repeats in it, it still has a sense of having to end with the material in the first section, the C major section. And that cadence comes in lower part of the piano. Bach could have gone up to F major to finish the piece, but here he's going down to F major. And the way those notes are sustained by the reverberation in the piano is a powerful effect. I want to show a little bit of this moment here, where that effect is in A minor, and here it's a high A minor chord that's sustained. And we have these wonderful sirens sort of singing the A minor chord in the distance. Statement of that waterfall 3 times in the soprano. Very rich. This is sort of the deepest, most heart on the sleeve moment of all the pieces I'm playing, even though it's an F major piece, these minor colors add so much to it. And then the fugue that follows is just the complete opposite affect. It's a G. And you'll see the green is the subject, what I just played for you. And it makes some significant appearances at the beginning of the piece. But what we can also notice is that it kind of goes absent without leave for a lot of the second half of the piece, where Bach is just working around different aspects of the subject without actually repeating the subject itself. One of the parts of the subject that we can see is this can be treated as a sequence. So here is a bass playing it, and it just goes on forever. From the high tenor range to the low bass. When he finally has the theme come in the subdominant key, which is getting on the flat side, and now he's in a key signature with one more flat. Instead of like going right back to F major, he goes even further into flats, into E flat major. And that leaves him like, now what do I do? Well, what he does is to go to the F key that's related to E flat major, or that would be the dark side of F, the F minor. Melodramatic F minor, and not really too much to do with the subject, but more about how much you can just explore this strange parallel minor key of F minor. And when the subject finally does come back, it comes back still in that shadow of F minor. The tune has goes all the way to B flat minor, and then it's like, just kidding. So it's an amazing piece on so many respects. And now I will play the F major Prelude and Fugue. So Re is the parallel minor key of F minor. And I confess that my first encounter with many of these Bach pieces was with the Swingle Singers Bach's Greatest Hits LP. And there's no better example of a tune that really swings with bass and rhythm section as this one. It's all based on the idea of the appoggiatura, Italian for leaning tone. And appoggiatura is something that's on the beat, dissonant, and resolves. That's a good one. So that is the yellow idea. And that's contrasted with a little staccato idea where the left hand plays single notes and the right hand fills in the 16th. And sometimes that situation is turned upside down so that the soprano, or the two voices in the right hand, have the slow chorus while the bottom voice fills in the 16th note filler. So those are the main ideas of the piece. This also has a repeat bar. So you'll hear the first section twice and then the second section twice. There's one kind of fun little bit of material where the little bass, the single walking bass line becomes two voices. And the right hand's still doing the fill. So you'll see some of that happening. And at the very end, there is, in purple, because the little harmonic colors always sound kind of purpley to me, is the diminished seventh chord kind of stops everything, and then there's a little cadence tacked on. This F minor fugue goes from that sort of blithe, happy feeling of the F minor prelude to something that's very aggressive, serious. It's this pounding rhythm really of it. And it's repeated with a kind of obsession that Beethoven would be proud of. There's a lot of that throughout the piece. So every time you hear the subject, you're going to hear. And that takes us through the first page, hearing the subject in the F minor and C minor, and finally major keys of A flat major, E flat major. So it takes us through the standard sort of succession of keys for a fugue subject to follow through, and finally ends with this big cadence in C minor. It starts over again. We get to this version of the theme. Again, it's in the same key you just heard. But notice what the left hand is doing, or the bass is doing. Not what you'd call tremendous counterpoint, but that's the point. It's all about how that one rhythmic motive can envelop the entire piece. We hear that kind of thing in a really special way during this section, where very richly colored seventh chord. Bum, 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 and then finally leading to the return to F minor. The last statement of the subject is in the alto, and normally, actually, altos don't stick out very much, so you normally want to put your last statement of the subject in the bass or in the soprano, as we've seen in all the other fugues. But this time it's in the alto because it allows us to use the soprano. So the theme what really is giving this last statement its power is that percussion sound coming from the soprano. One last thing to point out about that is that the blue boxes are episodes, and normally episodes are a place where the composer tries to give a little refresher from the material of the subject, or at least handle it in ways that's going away from its main focus. But here, this episode is built on this idea. Again, that's so unusually, powerfully obsessed with the one rhythmic motive, the alto. And one proof of the significance that has to Bach in his piece is the way the piece ends. Because rather than ending with some subject statement or some new coda material, he brings back this blue episode material, but this time with a rocking bass.